My name is Maren. The day I found out my family used my college fund to pay for my sister's wedding, I couldn't breathe. The pain wasn't just about money. It was about being invisible my whole life. But that day, I didn't stay quiet. I stood up, said the truth out loud, and finally chose myself. Please listen to the full story, then tell me, did I go too far? Or was it finally time? I'd really like to know what you think. I can't remember if that morning was sunny or cloudy. I just know I made my coffee stronger than usual. Not out of fatigue, really. Just something in the air. Like when you wake up and feel something shifted, but can't put your finger on it yet. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock above the fridge. Mom was on her third cup of decaf, already flipping through her wedding planning binder. She had the phone cradled between her shoulder and cheek, making arrangements with the caterer while scribbling notes with that perfect, slanted handwriting she always used. Neat. Precise. Unbending. Rowena had just texted her another photo, dress number 3, something lacy and off-white with pearl buttons running all the way down the back. This one has more presence, Mom said, turning her phone toward me, expecting agreement. I nodded politely. I always nodded politely. Then I opened my email. Willamette Ridge had sent a reminder. Tuition deposit was due in 3 days. I stared at the screen a moment longer than I needed to, reading the lines over and over. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I was afraid of what came next. I cleared my throat and asked, "Hey, Mom, do you know if the college fund is still where it was? I need to make the deposit this week." She didn't even look up from her binder. "We'll talk about that later, honey. Right now, I need to figure out how many place settings we need if the Fairchilds bring their cousins. It's just the school's deadline is soon." Mom finally looked at me then. Her eyes were calm, but there was something under the surface, something impatient. "Maren, you're young. You've got time. College isn't going anywhere. But this wedding? It's happening once. Your sister deserves to feel special." That was the first time I heard it. Not the words exactly, but the tone. Like my plans were optional. Like my future could wait, because Rowena's deserved to happen first. I didn't argue. I just took a sip of my coffee and tried to swallow around the lump forming in my throat. An hour later, I tried texting Rowena. Something short. Just, "Hey, are you still adding people to the wedding chat?" Her reply came quick. "Oh, shoot. Maybe Mom forgot to include you. No worries. You're not a bridesmaid, right?" "Right." I scrolled through the photos she'd shared publicly. Cake tastings, venue walkthroughs, champagne toasts with her bridal party. I wasn't in a single frame. No one had even thought to include me in the group text. That night, after dinner, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my laptop screen. I opened the email again. Then I opened the online banking page, the one Mom used to show me once a year, always with the same line. "This is your future, Maren. Don't take it lightly." Only now, when I logged in, the account balance wasn't just low. It was empty. Zero. No record of recent activity, no pending transfers. Just gone. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry or scream or pound my fists against the wall like I might have done when I was younger. I just stared. I stared at the place where my future used to be, where trust used to live. I stared at a blinking cursor in an empty comment box, thinking about writing something to Rowena or Mom. But what would I even say? No, instead I just sat there. In silence. My hands cold on the keyboard. That night I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers. Dead ends. Rows of zeros where something sacred used to be. The next morning, I woke early and poured myself another cup of coffee, just as strong, maybe stronger. I sat by the window and listened to the house stretch into the day. Hollow, like something important had been removed. I didn't know then just how much would be pulled away. How many lines would be crossed before I finally drew one of my own. But that morning I knew this. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being dramatic. I was just finally seeing things for what they were. That day, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there looking at an empty account number, once called my college fund, and realized I'd never really been holding the key. I kept turning it over in my mind, like a stone in my pocket that wouldn't smooth out no matter how much I rubbed it. The money was gone. My name was still on the email from Willamette Ridge, as if that meant anything now. It wasn't just about the account being empty. It was what that emptiness said. That someone had decided, without telling me, that my future could wait. I started remembering all the little moments I'd packed away. Things that seemed harmless at the time. When Rowena turned 16, she got a used Corolla, nothing fancy, but still. I remember standing in the driveway clapping as Dad handed her the keys, and Mom wiped away tears like it was a wedding. When I turned 16, I got a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. There was a sticky note on the cover that read, "We believe in you." I told myself that was enough. I always did. Mom always said she treated us equally, just in different ways. Your sister needs more support. You're the one who doesn't ask for much. She was right. I didn't ask. But not because I didn't want things. I just learned early that wanting made people uncomfortable. 2 days after the bank account revelation, I went in for my shift at Hollow Pine. It's a small cafe, tucked between a laundromat and a barber shop, with chipped turquoise paint and a bell above the door that jangles like it's been doing the same tired dance for years. I was behind the counter refilling the lemon water when I saw her, and Inez. She didn't come around often. I remembered her from holidays, standing off to the side with her hands in her coat pockets while everyone else buzzed around Rowena like she was the grand finale. Mom said Inez had always been a bit offbeat, never married, always moving jobs, never stayed close to family. I was taught to admire her from a distance, not ask too many questions. But that day, she walked in like she had a reason. Chai latte, extra cinnamon. "If that's still something you all do," she said with a quick smile. Her voice was softer than I remembered, more grounded, maybe. I made her drink and handed it over. "You remembered your order." "I don't forget things that matter," she replied, eyes steady on mine. She sat at a corner table and about 10 minutes later, waved me over when things slowed down. "How's school planning going?" she asked. Not in the usual polite, empty way, but like she actually wanted to know. I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I was allowed to say. "I'm figuring things out," I said, half-truths being the safest kind in my house. Inez stirred her chai slowly, eyes still on her cup. "Did you ever get that trust your grandparents left for your college? I remember them being so proud of putting that together for you." I blinked. My heart tripped over itself. I thought. Mom said she was keeping it safe. Inez looked up. Her eyes didn't narrow. They didn't widen either. Just quiet recognition. Like she'd already suspected as much and had hoped she was wrong. "That's odd," she said. "It wasn't meant to go through your parents. Not the way I remember it." I didn't know what to say. Something about her calmness made it worse, like the weight of what she wasn't saying was pressing down between us. When she left, she touched my arm lightly and said, "You ever need to talk about anything real, you know where I am." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I did. After my shift, I walked home slower than usual, like my body didn't want to catch up to my thoughts. Every block, every porch light flickering on, every dry leaf tumbling across the sidewalk, all of it felt just a little off, like the backdrop to a play where I wasn't sure what part one was supposed to be reading. By the time I got home, Rowena had posted a story on Instagram. A photo of her hand holding a champagne flute, captioned, "Final tasting today. One step closer to Mrs." I didn't even know what she was tasting. Or who she was with. I scrolled through the comments. Congratulations from friends, fire emojis, heart eyes. Nothing from me. No mention of me. I went to bed early that night, but I couldn't fall asleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny shadows from the trees outside my window. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal, that the money must have been moved, and Mom just forgot to tell me. But deep down, I knew there was something no one was saying. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Because what if the silence wasn't just a mistake? What if it had always been the plan? The next morning, I asked Mom about the college money again. I tried to sound calm, casual, like it wasn't eating me alive. She was spreading apricot preserves on toast like it was any other day. "I just need to know if the account was moved," I said. I have to pay the deposit or I'll lose my place. She didn't look up. Maren, why are you so focused on this? You should be happy for your sister. That's what matters right now. I am happy for her, I said, and it wasn't a lie, not entirely. But this matters too. Her eyes finally met mine, and there was this flicker of something, frustration? Guilt? You always were the practical one. I thought you'd understand that timing is everything. What does that mean? I asked, even though I already knew. She shook her head, voice lowering. It's complicated. Let's not make this about money. It's about family, about support. That word, support, burned like vinegar. It had been used my whole life to mean sit down and be quiet. Later that day, Rowena called me. Her voice was bright at first, too bright. Hey, Mom said you've been asking questions. Yeah, about the money for school. She sighed. Maren, come on. You're making things harder than they need to be. This wedding is a big deal. Mom's under a ton of pressure. Do you really want to pile on? I'm not piling on. I'm trying to get answers. You're being selfish, she snapped. You think this is about you, but it's not. It's about celebrating something good for once. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I got an email from Willamette Ridge. The deadline had passed. My spot wasn't guaranteed anymore. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just crawled into bed, fully clothed, and let the quiet close in around me. I skipped dinner. Didn't answer texts. Just stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I felt like someone in that house actually saw me. Maybe never. The next day at work, Elaine, one of the regulars at Hollow Pine, pulled me aside during my break. She was probably in her mid-60s, sharp as a tack, always wore red lipstick and orthopedic sneakers. Sugar, she said, watching me stir a cup of weak coffee like it might give me answers. You look like you've been through a blender. I shrugged. You want to talk about it? Not really. She nodded like she understood more than I was saying. Then she leaned closer. Listen, I had a sister who used to take everything and call it love. The clothes, the car, the family heirlooms. Said it was her turn. And I let her. For years. I looked up at her. She didn't flinch. One day, I realized, if you have to disappear so someone else can shine, that's not love. That's control. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. You're allowed to want your own life, she said. And you're not selfish for protecting what's yours. After my shift, I went home and dug through the old emails Mom used to forward me, account summaries, notes from the bank. I found one from 2 years ago with login info for the fund Grandpa set up. I logged in, but of course, the account had already been drained. Still, I opened the detailed history and started going line by line. That's when I saw them, transactions that didn't match anything I'd ever done. Payments to Cypress and Gold events. Multiple charges from White Birch Bridal. A deposit to Rose and Sage Venue deposit. The dates lined up with when Rowena's planning had kicked into gear. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding in my chest like it wanted out. So it was true. It wasn't just a mistake, or a delay, or something complicated. It had been a choice. A clear, conscious choice. And I had been the last to know. I closed the laptop, but the silence in my room didn't feel peaceful. It felt sharp, like the kind of quiet that follows a slap. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in that house another night. I wasn't sure I could. There's always a reason, they say. But I was starting to think the real question wasn't why they did it. It was why they thought they could. 3 days before the wedding, Inez texted me. Meet me at Westside Park if you can. There's something you should see. It was one of those Eugene spring mornings that couldn't decide what season it wanted to be. The sky kept playing between overcast and sun-spotted, the breeze sharp enough to make you pull your jacket tighter, but not cold enough to turn around and go home. I found her sitting on a metal bench under one of the old oak trees, a thermos beside her, and a manila envelope resting on her knees. She looked calm in the way only people who've lived through quiet heartbreaks know how to be. Thanks for coming, she said, patting the space next to her without turning. I sat down slowly, my heart already racing. I didn't know what I was nervous about. Maybe I did. I've had this for a while, she said, handing me the envelope. Didn't want to get in the middle of anything, but things don't feel right anymore. Inside was a document that felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. I unfolded it gently. My fingers trembled just enough to make it hard to read at first, but then the bold print caught my eye. Beneficiary: Maren Elsley. Trust established by Harold and Edith Elsley. Date: June 12, 2015. My grandparents' signatures. No mention of a secondary trustee. No fine print naming my mother as the financial manager. It was mine.
Plain as day.
I blinked hard. Why did it go through Mom, then? They weren't supposed to let that happen, Inez said, voice barely above the wind rustling through the leaves. But after your granddad passed, Clarice told the bank you were too young to handle it. That she'd manage it until you turned 21. I didn't even know until months later. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she said. She stopped answering my calls. Told me it was none of my business. And maybe I let it go. I kept hoping she'd do the right thing eventually. I stared down at the paper again. My name looked strange to me there, familiar but distant, like it belonged to another version of myself. A version that people once planned for, believed in. I'm scared, I whispered. I hadn't meant to say it aloud. She placed a hand on mine, warm and still. I know. But listen to me, Maren. You're not wrong. You're just waking up. And the longer you let someone else write your story, the harder it is to take the pen back. I walked home in a fog. I couldn't remember the intersections I crossed or the cars that passed. Just the folder in my bag, heavier than any textbook I'd carried through high school, heavier than the weight I'd pretended not to feel for years. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't talk. I just sat at my desk and started printing. Bank statements, screenshots, vendor names, bridal boutique charges, deposits to an event planner I'd never heard of, but could guess all too well. It wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. It was real, documented, deliberate. I called Willamette Ridge the next morning, told them there'd been a financial emergency, and I couldn't start this semester. The woman on the phone had the kindest voice. She didn't press me, just said she understood, and that she'd make a note on my file. After I hung up, I put my face in my hands and cried. Not the dramatic, sobbing kind. Just quiet.
Exhausted.
Like every part of me was slowly exhaling all at once. 5 days until the wedding. Everyone had their part. Their dress. Their script. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't even been mentioned. And then, as if on cue, a message came through from Aunt Miriam. We weren't close. She always hovered near whoever had the nicest shoes at family reunions. Hey kiddo, just heard you're not coming to Rowena's big day? I know tensions are high, but you don't want to burn bridges over a bridesmaid dress. Try to let it go, okay? I stared at the message so long, the screen dimmed. That's what they thought this was about.
A dress.
A photo. A placement in the lineup. They didn't see the theft. The betrayal. The gutting silence that came with knowing you were a supporting character in a story you were promised was yours too. I didn't reply. Not because I was holding a grudge, but because there was no use shouting into a room full of people who'd already decided you were the problem for finally speaking. They had their reasons, I'm sure. But I'd finally found mine. And it was this. They never saw me. And maybe they never would. The days before the wedding blurred together like overexposed film, bright, buzzing, and strangely hollow. Everything around me moved fast, yet I felt like I was walking underwater. The house pulsed with a kind of restless energy, last-minute deliveries, tightly wound to-do lists, urgent whispers about table linens and vendor delays. I was still there, still breathing the same air, sleeping in the same bed. But I wasn't in it, not really. Just orbiting. Just functioning. Can you drive Rowena's dress to the cleaners? Can you pick up the lemon water jars from Hollow Pine? Can you stay home in case the florists show up early? Each request was said with the assumption I'd say yes. And I did. Every time. I wasn't asked how I was feeling. I wasn't asked if I was attending the wedding, or even if I wanted to. No one even wondered where I fit into the story anymore. Maybe they assumed I knew. Maybe they assumed I didn't matter. And maybe, for a while, I'd accepted that too. Then, one night, I found the wedding program laid out on the kitchen counter. Thick, ivory paper. Gold foil names. Carefully listed titles and roles. Bridesmaids. Groomsmen. Flower girl. Officiant. Reader. My name was nowhere. Not even as family of the bride. There was a flicker of heat in my chest when I saw it, but it was duller than I expected, like a wound that had scabbed over, then reopened so many times it just pulsed, quietly. I folded the program and put it back where I found it. I didn't want to crumple it. I didn't want to stain it with tears. I didn't want them to know that, even now, I still noticed. Later that night, I passed by the study. The door was half closed, light spilling out into the hallway. I heard my mom's voice. "Of course, I know it's not fair," she was saying. Her tone was hushed, clipped. But what was I supposed to do? The money had to come from somewhere. A pause. "She's a good girl, but she lives in her head too much. Always has. She wouldn't last 2 semesters at a real college. She doesn't have that kind of grit." I stopped breathing. Just froze in place, hand lightly brushing the hallway wall for balance. Another pause. "Yes, I'll make sure she doesn't cause a scene. She knows better than that." It felt like being punched, not in the face, but in the gut, where it lingers longer. The kind of blow you don't react to right away because your body can't decide what hurts most. I turned away, walked numbly to the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and pressed both palms to the sink. The porcelain was cold, almost grounding. I stared at my reflection like it might offer answers. It didn't. She doesn't have that kind of grit. I whispered it back to myself once, just to hear how it sounded, just to prove it was real. All my life, I'd been called the easy one, the understanding one, the child who didn't make trouble. I thought it was love. I wanted it to be love. But now I realized, being the quiet one doesn't mean being respected. It just makes you easier to ignore. I slid down onto the cold tile floor, back against the cabinet.
I didn't sob.
My body didn't have the energy for that. It was more of a quiet unraveling, tears slipping out of my eyes like steam rising off a stove, unannounced, constant. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about being written out of a life I was supposed to be part of. About how easily I could be erased and repurposed as the errand runner, the background extra, the afterthought. All because I had trained them to think I was fine. Because I made it so easy to walk over me without ever raising my voice. I remembered every birthday I said, "Don't make a fuss." Every school award I tucked away because Rowena's spotlight was already shining. Every moment I swallowed the lump in my throat, smiled through the silence, and told myself, it's not worth ruining the mood. But silence hadn't protected me. It had only paved the road for this. Inez's words echoed again in my mind. The longer you let people rewrite your story, the harder it is to get it back. I sat there for what felt like hours. I stared at the crack beneath the cabinet door. Hairline thin. Probably always there. I just hadn't noticed. Funny, how things can break so quietly. Eventually, I stood up, washed my face with cold water, looked at myself again. I didn't look brave. I didn't look transformed. But I looked back.
Still here.
Still standing. And maybe, finally, ready to stop being silent. The morning of the wedding, the sky was still that pale, half-lit gray, like the world hadn't quite decided to wake up yet. I dressed slowly, deliberately. Faded jeans, my softest blue button-down, hair in a low braid. Nothing polished. Just mine. I zipped my old canvas bag and paused by the front door. My hands were steady. That surprised me. How calm I felt, considering what I was about to do. Inez opened her door before I knocked. She was already holding her mug, steam curling up like breath in the morning chill. "I printed everything," I said, handing her the folder. It was thicker now, bank statements, screen captures, messages, trust documents. Every proof I'd once hoped I'd never need. She flipped through them slowly, her brows knit with quiet focus. When she was done, she tapped the folder once with her index finger. "If you want to pursue this legally," she said, "I know someone. He's not loud, but he's the kind of man who doesn't lose. I shook my head.
Not yet.
I just needed to stop pretending. She looked at me, really looked, and smiled, soft and proud. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, Maren. I carried that sentence with me like armor as I stepped through the manicured gates of cypress and gold. The place looked like something out of a bridal magazine, gilded entrance doors, marble floors, peony arrangements so tall they blocked the view of anything real. It didn't smell like joy. It smelled like pressure and presentation. Inside, the receptionist glanced up from her tablet. Are you at the bridal party? I'm her sister, I said. She scanned her list, hesitated. I'm not seeing you on the… I know, I said, and walked past her. I followed the sounds of laughter, of clinking glasses, of picture-perfect happiness, and found the garden. Rowena stood under an arch of blush-colored roses, laughing for the camera. Her gown shimmered in the sunlight, layers of lace and satin catching the breeze like it was trained to flatter her. She didn't see me at first, but the second our eyes met, her smile dropped an inch. The way someone smiles at a mistake they can't undo in public. She walked over with that fake warmth she always used when she wanted to stay in control. What are you doing here? I held up the folder. I came to give you this.
She didn't move to take it.
Her hands stayed pinned to her hips, elbows out like armor. Mom was suddenly there too, her voice taut. Maren, this is not the time. Every time's been the wrong time, I said. I stepped forward and held the folder out, forcing them to see it. You used my college fund, I said, quietly but not softly.
You didn't ask.
You didn't tell me. You took it. And then you acted like I should be grateful. A few heads turned. People in pastel dresses. Distant cousins. One of Rowena's bridesmaids whispered something, and another giggled behind a flute of champagne. Mom's face went stiff. We'll talk about this later. No, I said. You've had years to talk. I spent those years waiting, listening, shrinking. Rowena cut in, arms folded tight. You're really doing this today? On my wedding day? I looked at her, really looked. She was flawless, furious, and completely shocked that someone else might ask for space in her spotlight. I'm not here to ruin your day, I said. I'm here to stop letting you ruin mine. That silenced her. Just for a moment. Long enough for the photographer to pause, for the background chatter to hush slightly. I turned before they could say anything else. Walked past the champagne bar, the welcome sign with gold calligraphy, the perfect little boxes of monogrammed macarons. No one followed me.
No one asked me to stay.
And I didn't feel like apologizing for taking up space. Outside, the air hit cooler than expected.
Clean.
Like a reset. I stood at the edge of the parking lot and let myself breathe.
Deep.
Even.
Whole.
I wasn't the good daughter anymore. I wasn't the fixer. The peacemaker. The one who knew her place and stayed small inside it. I was just me. And for the first time, that was not only enough, it was everything. The text came the morning after the wedding, like a pebble tapped against a window. Let's talk. Just us. It was short, but I read it over and over again, half hoping my screen would glitch and show something else. I knew what it meant. A private meeting. A controlled setting. A chance to reframe what had happened the day before. Maybe even erase it. Still, I went. The house hadn't changed, but I had. The chipped steps were still chipped. The same weathered garden gnomes sat lopsided by the front porch. Same patchy grass, same wind chimes Mom always said brought peace. But walking up to that door, I felt like a visitor to someone else's life. She was at the kitchen table when I walked in. Same table I used to do math homework on. Same floral cushion she once patched up after I tore it with a pencil sharpener in 5th grade. Her hands were wrapped around a mug, but it wasn't steaming. She hadn't taken a sip. Sit down, she said. I didn't move. She took a breath, deep and shaky, like someone preparing to dive into cold water. Maren, I know you're upset. I get it, but I need you to understand something. I did what I thought was right. I didn't let her pause. For who? I asked. My voice was calm, which surprised us both.
For both of you, she replied. Rowena needed the help now.
You'll have other chances. I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but wasn't one. Other chances, I repeated slowly. You emptied my college fund. You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me. That wasn't doing what was right. That was theft. She looked away for a second, down at her mug, then back. I did it because I thought you'd be okay. You've always been the strong one. The one who doesn't need hand-holding. There it was again. That line. The one she used to justify every time she looked through me instead of at me. Every time she assumed I'd bend instead of break. I didn't need hand-holding, I said. But I needed to be believed in. I needed to be seen. For a moment, something shifted in her eyes. Regret? Maybe. Or maybe just the weight of being called out without the benefit of a distraction. You'll never survive out there without family, she said, voice sharpening. You think the world's going to protect you? You're dreaming. I blinked slowly.
No.
I think you need me to believe that. Because if I don't, I stop letting you make choices for me and call it love. She didn't have a reply. I don't hate you, I added. But I won't keep shrinking just so you can feel like a good mother. And I'm done playing the quiet character in Rowena's perfect little story. There was nothing left to say. So I didn't. I turned around and walked out of that kitchen, the one I used to think held the heart of our home. Now it just felt like a museum, carefully dusted, frozen in time. Back at Inez's, I packed the rest of my things into the little guest room. She didn't ask questions, just made space. The next morning, we went over the legal steps. Inez had already contacted her friend from the legal clinic, someone who understood family messes and how to untangle them without making them worse. The process of reclaiming what was left of the trust had begun. The part one thought would feel terrifying just felt procedural. Like I was finally switching the lights on in a room I'd been stumbling through for years. You know, Inez said as we ate toast and grapefruit at the kitchen counter, most people never say a word. They spend their whole lives calling it loyalty, calling it love. I nodded. I'm tired of being loyal to people who wouldn't even flinch before cutting me loose. That afternoon, I took the long way home from the grocery store and passed by the little bakery on 3rd and Oak. The one where Rowena picked out her wedding cake months ago. The window display still had her photo taped to it, one of those professional shots of her holding a cupcake like it was a diamond ring. Her smile was polished. Her laugh staged. Picture perfect. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Long enough to remember what I used to feel when I saw that face. Resentment, maybe. Sadness, always. But not now. Now I just felt done. Not broken. Not bitter.
Just done.
I don't hate you, I whispered, not to the photo, but to something older and heavier than that. I just refuse to keep auditioning for your life. And then I kept walking. The ground felt firm beneath me. My breath was even. There was no dramatic music playing. No one turned to applaud. But still, something in me had shifted. Not louder. Not harder. Just clearer. I moved into Inez's apartment 2 days after the wedding. It wasn't glamorous. The stairs creaked, the hallway light flickered sometimes, and the building smelled like cinnamon, wood polish, and something older. Books, maybe.
History.
Her second-story unit overlooked a quiet street with maple trees just beginning to hint at fall. In the mornings, light came in slanted and golden through the lace curtains she never replaced. Everything inside had a life before me, mismatched chairs, a coffee table with a chipped leg, shelves stuffed with dog-eared paperbacks, tiny ceramic animals lined up like they were watching the room. Flea market strays, Inez called them. But they've got charm. She gave me the guest room. It was simple. A twin bed. A leaning bookcase. A desk that squeaked when you wrote on it too hard. The bedsheets were lavender, soft, faded from sunlight, and the corners never stayed tucked. I didn't fix them. I liked the imperfection. It reminded me this was real, that I was allowed to take up space here. Every morning, I'd wake to the smell of tea and something warm baking, toast usually. On the counter, beside the mug, I'd find a note in Inez's handwriting. Always small. Always folded once. You're allowed to rest. You're not behind. You're healing. You don't owe them your silence. And once, you deserve to live, not just survive. That one made me cry. Not all at once. But later, when I was folding laundry and the dryer made its usual grumbling noise, I just sat down and let it come. The first few weeks were strange. I was free, but I didn't know what to do with freedom yet. My body still woke up tense, like it expected to be reprimanded. I'd walk through the apartment quiet, like I was waiting for someone to knock on the door and tell me it had all been a mistake. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling in the dark and wonder, did I go too far? Is Mom sitting in that kitchen thinking she lost her daughter? Did I break something that can't be fixed? I never got answers. But over time, the questions changed. Because guilt, real or not, has a way of sticking to the skin. But that doesn't mean it belongs there. Sometimes, guilt is just grief in disguise. Grief for who you thought people were. For who you tried to be. For all the years you stayed small just to keep the air in the room from shifting. Inez never asked for updates. Never hovered. She gave me silence, but the safe kind. The kind that lets you breathe. When the letter finally came, her lawyer friend had sent it certified mail. Inez read it before handing it to me. Her face gave nothing away. They're not fighting it, she said simply. They've agreed to return the remaining funds. And pay your first semester tuition. No statement. No note. I nodded. I didn't expect one. She tilted her head. You okay? I think so, I said. Or, I'm getting there. That fall, I enrolled at Lane Community College. It wasn't the university I'd once dreamed of, but it felt right. Small classrooms, familiar streets, no illusions of grandeur. I chose early childhood education, not because anyone told me to, but because it felt like a way forward. Like something I would have needed once. I also picked up a part-time job at a support center downtown. It wasn't glamorous either. Fluorescent lights. Secondhand books. But the kids who came through its doors? They were magic. Some of them didn't speak much. Others wouldn't meet your eyes. Most had learned, like I had, that staying quiet made the adults feel more comfortable. So I didn't push them.
I just sat beside them, colored with them.
Let them lead. Because sometimes healing isn't about what you fix. It's about what you witness. And how gently you can hold space for what someone else is afraid to say. One evening, after a long day and a slow bus ride home, I sat down at Inez's creaky desk with a mug of tea and opened my notebook. I let my pen move without thinking too hard. I don't hate my mother. I don't resent my sister. I'm not waiting for an apology that may never come. I just want to live without having to explain why I deserve to. I closed the notebook and ran my fingers along the cover for a moment, then slid it back onto the shelf between a copy of En Lamotte and a cracked photo frame holding an old picture of Inez and a friend I didn't recognize. Outside, the rain had started. Not a downpour, just that gentle, steady kind of drizzle that seems more like the earth exhaling than anything else. It tapped lightly on the window, rhythmic and soft, like it had nowhere else to be. I sat still and let it wash the day away. And I thought about that day at the wedding. How I walked away. Alone, unsure, but clear. I didn't lose a family. I lost a role I was never meant to keep. And in its place, I found something softer, stronger, quieter. I found me. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't walking away, it's believing you deserve to. If this story reminded you of something buried, something quiet you've carried for too long, I hope you give yourself the grace to name it. Not for revenge. Not for attention. But for peace. The kind that doesn't ask you to shrink just to keep the room calm. Have you ever been the one who stayed silent, just to keep the family together? If you have, I see you. And I hope you know, it's never too late to choose yourself. If this story meant something to you, I'd be honored to have you with me again next time. Until then, take care of your heart, it's done a lot of heavy lifting.